Hello. Hello, I'll just adjust this. Hello. Thank you, everyone, for coming along today. So, yes, my name is Angela Kirkwood. I'm an illustrator and animator from Edinburgh. So just a little introduction about my work. I love to create these sort of bright, surreal illustrations and animations that have a real sense of joy and nostalgia that runs through them. So I'm really interested in creating these sort of zany worlds that are filled with really expressive, oddball characters, and I love to explore that through animation. But it's only really in the last 2 years that I've been full-time with illustration and animation, and getting there was a lot of trial and error. So I did study illustration at university, but I entered the world of work as a graphic designer working in creative agencies. At first it was a job that I, really enjoyed. But as the years passed, I did start to feel this rising sense of misery. I was working, a lot on, working long hours on projects that I wasn't finding totally inspiring. And I was just starting to feel really kind of burnt out and a bit creatively unfulfilled. And I started to think, maybe working in creative agencies isn't really for me. So after a Zoom call with my boss that went slightly haywire, I decided to quit on the spot, which was excellent because I was free, but also terrible because I had no job. Yes. Thankfully, I did manage to get by doing the odd bit of freelance design work. But really, during this time, I got a lot back into drawing, not with any plans to become an illustrator, but really just for my own kind of personal enjoyment. And as I drew, I started to have these overwhelming feelings like, wow, wouldn't it be so good if these drawings could move? I had ideas for characters and scenes, but, really no idea how to animate. What is animation? So some of you may be familiar with this book, The Animator's Survival Kit by Richard Williams. So I picked up this book after hearing, that really it is the book to help beginners in animation. It's filled with lots of notes and diagrams on how to make moving pictures. But it almost had the opposite effect in that I almost gave up on animation before I'd even started because of this book. Okay, so the book begins by, espousing the importance of, being a master at drawing. Really it's most important that you're an excellent draftsperson, with a really good understanding of form and anatomy before you should even attempt animation. And, this is something that could take years or, maybe even a lifetime. I remember, looking over to my sketchbook at the time, which looked like this. Yeah. I just remember thinking, I remember thinking, wow, I really would have loved to have done animation, but I guess that dream for me is now dead. Out of curiosity, I did flick through further chapters, but things only really continued to deteriorate. First with an anecdote about how to draw a supposedly gay walk, and then illustrations that describe the feminine walk, which were, quite sexualized with a ballerina, a fashion model, and a stripper as examples. But probably my favorite part was, how does one draw perfectly bouncing boobs? Well, Richard has you covered. So, at this point, I started to realize, maybe I shouldn't take this book totally as gospel, and that maybe I could also disregard that opening chapter that had made animation just seem so, out of reach and, unattainable, because really I just wanted to do animation for fun. Side note, I should say, while the book does have a few problematic stereotypes and is definitely of its time, it did actually have some quite good notes on things like timing and weight. FYI, close brackets. Okay. So from that, really, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to try and learn animation myself through trial and error. So this was one of the first animations that I'd created. It was quite simple, really, just on Procreate. So, and I approached it in a process called straight ahead. So whereas normally you would maybe first draw in the keyframes and then fill those with like in-between frames, it's a more linear process in that you start with the first frame and you just kind of go straight ahead, so it tends to make things warp and feel quite sort of fluid, and you can get kind of more unpredictable results. So when I was creating the animations, it was important that I just didn't really have too much of a plan, but it's seeing like, where do the drawings take me? Sometimes that would involve, using prompts to help create animations. So, writing a list of words and putting them together to create like a nonsensical story, which I would then animate. But yeah, like, I remember when oh, thank you. Yeah, I remember when I'd first created this and I was like, whoa, seeing all these characters and scenes that I had in my mind just come to life, like, it just felt so magical and just like, I don't know, overwhelming. And for me, that kind of like process totally makes like, I think creating animations is often quite a laborious process, so it totally just makes up for that. And I just love that sense that, like anything is possible, and, really the only limits are your own imagination. So a big part of my exploration, is finding ways to imbue characters or inanimate objects with personalities, So through how they move, you can really kind of get a sense of their mood. And for me, that's like one of the most exciting things about animation. It's like that art of movement, and rather than thinking about like just what moves, it's how something moves that can really communicate the idea or the feeling. So during this time, I was just really inspired by, the things that were around me. So this was inspired by Hamish. He is a Labrador that I was dog sitting for a while. And, every time we took Hamish out for a walk, people just loved to stop to talk to and to pet him. So I imagined him as this sort of Pied Piper figure, but with a saxophone. And crowds of people follow him wherever he goes. But yeah, so, with this, again, it's really just all about that, like, experimenting with movement. I had been too impatient to copy any of the walk cycles from the animator's survival kit. So I really just, like, tried to kind of make my own. And I remember when I, like, played it all back together, like, I just burst out laughing because, like, I didn't do it on purpose. Like, I didn't expect them to all be so, unhinged. But I actually turned out okay because, it adds to that kind of like sense of chaos in the animation. But yeah, I don't know, for me, like through personal projects, I really realized like there's no right or wrong way to do anything. And actually I found like embracing my limits, like not knowing how to animate properly, has actually led to way more interesting and fun work. And, the flaws and imperfections are actually what gives the animation, the character and the personality. And I think for me, it's just trying to have fun and, like, enjoy it, what I'm making. And, I love creating these characters that have just got loads of personality. And I feel like I'm just, keep trying to build this sort of wacky world. I was very excited to be invited along with 5 other artists last year to create window displays for Selfridges. So the theme was centered on celebration, and the concept was to create these sort of otherworldly shop fronts that reflect the departments within the store. So it was very exciting because, up until now, most of my work had been screen-based, but it's also so exciting to have the chance to make something, in real life and also like at such scale. So because the windows are almost like, mini rooms, it wasn't just thinking about the usual color and composition, but, also like depth and placement of each element and, how perspective might affect things. This was the final window, so, for the opticians, so it's thinking, who might visit this opticians, perhaps some sort of, glamorous fashionista characters, just kind of having fun. So this was for Dolly's Cafe. So, another important thing to consider when designing the windows is, fun ways to showcase the actual products themselves. And I guess another kind of part of my work is I really like to anthropomorphize objects and, give things facial expressions and just play around with, inanimate objects, and, giving them lots of personality and character and, just feeling like as though you could just imagine the characters just sort of, jumping into life. So this was the entrance to the Manchester shop. It's quite hard to convey in pictures, but I think in person, the sheer sort of scale combined with the color is quite visually arresting, and, you really kind of almost got that sense that you're entering this fantastical other world. So the campaign continued through the store in murals. I created lots of these characters as well that were sort of all hidden around the shop, all at sort of different scales. So some were larger. We had some sort of little smaller creatures hidden around. And again, it's just considering how do these illustrations actually interact with the environment or the products around them. And finally, so this was in the center of the London store. It's a sort of celebratory scene that expands over sort of 4 floors. So, more is revealed as you sort of go up the escalators. But that is just a little insight into my journey. Thank you so much for listening.